As an Oregonian, I'm trying to cover the ways that the Trump regime is negatively impacting the red rural parts of my state. Not only because I care about everybody in Oregon, but because I think what is happening in rural Oregon is a snapshot of what is happening all over this country. The ways that small conservative communities in rural Oregon are being hurt very much is the experience of small conservative communities all over the United States. So I'm going to keep talking about it because I care about what happens all over the state, not just in the deeply blue parts of Portland and Salem and Eugene. I used to live in a very red part of very, very rural Oregon. And I know how hard those folks were struggling before Trump got into office. And I know that they believed the lie that he was going to fix everything for them. And so I think it's important that we talk accurately about the harm that the Trump regime and Elon Musk are doing in our rural communities. I'm going to draw your attention to an article from 3 days ago in the Oregon Capital Chronicle. It is entitled, "With Trump Tariffs, Oregon Wine is Over a Barrel." It's by Randy Stopoulos. One of the first Oregon impacts of this year's international trade wars came to our house in a pleasing way, in the form of a few bottles of good wine, gifts from friends who work in the industry. We live in North Willamette wine country, where personal connections to the wine industry are not hard to find. Yep, I have multiple friends whose families own wineries, or they themselves are vintners here in Oregon. Okay, so the author was gifted these bottles of wine. These bottles were emblematic, though, of a bigger situation not nearly so benign. Some weeks ago, as wineries in our region packed and sent crates of wine north to Canada, as they have long done, they encountered a surprise. The border was as far as many of them got, and their wine had to be trucked back unsold to Oregon. Canada has essentially stopped accepting any alcohol from the US, including Oregon alcohol. I know folks have been like, oh, Jack Daniels is in trouble, but there are vintners and there are distillers all over the country. Oregon has a thriving distilling business. It has thriving vineyards. And of course, we're absolutely known for our breweries as well. Okay, back to the article. The response and rules at the border have shifted, but sales are being heavily impacted by Trump's recent tariff announcements. Many Oregon winemakers are accumulating a wine surplus. Some, probably small but unknown numbers of cases, may be turning into giveaways. Pleasant surprises for recipients, but lousy for wine producers' bottom line. Trump's massive tariffs that he's implemented and then pulled back and then re-implemented and then pulled back, and like all of this roller coaster is expected to further dampen the state's wine trade. Wine is a small part of Oregon's trade picture, smaller than some other commodities, but it still offers a useful insight into how tariffs are affecting the state. And it is a major industry in Oregon with about 1,100 wineries. Last week, a friend who had worked in the wine import and export business described for me how the system worked. When shipped internationally, the product changed ownership from the producer or wholesaler to my friend's company before it crossed the border, so that when the shipment cleared customs, his company paid any of the tariffs or fees that existed. That was the first impact of a tariff. Companies ordinarily factor tariffs into the retail price, and individual wine buyers ultimately pay most of or all of that cost. That boosted the purchase price. And that increased purchase price is how most people experience tariffs. The existence of a tariff doesn't keep something from crossing national lines, and a small tariff may not matter much, but large ones can change the business incentives for all parties. Oregon winemakers might, in one way, at first, benefit from higher tariffs on the countries such as Italy, Chile, Australia, Argentina, and many more that import wine into the U.S., where those tariffs are being imposed, right? Because now you're seeing that imported wine has this tariff tacked onto it, so it's much more expensive than U.S. wine. That might drive some domestic wine drinkers more toward American producers, which could help Oregon wine producers, though it usually has the effect of raising domestic prices as well. Yes, we know historically when an imported good has a tariff put on it and the price goes up, 25%, the domestically produced equivalent, that company is like, okay, well, now I can get away with raising prices 10 or 15%, and it will still be less than the imported product. So when tariffs roll in, domestic goods also go up in cost because those companies, they want to increase their profit margin. Other aspects of higher border crossing prices are likely to cut against the industry. There are hidden costs to American companies that come with tariffs that you might not be aware of if you're not in the industry itself, such as higher prices paid by the Oregon wine industry for imported barrels, steel for supplies and equipment. Production equipment itself in the wine industry is not usually produced here in the States, it's imported. Oregon's leading export targets overall are in order Mexico, China, and then Canada, and about 81,000 jobs are reliant on that export trade. The impact on trade may be easier to observe in the wine industry because close to half of all Oregon wine exports go to Canada. In 2022, that was 73,323 cases of wine. The total export amount was 162,939. We're just watching it play out in real time, and it's not pretty, said Alex Sokolblasser, president of Sokolblasser Winery in Dayton, Oregon. All that business we worked for, and the president has lit a match to it. Anime Vineyards near Carlton has been moving from local tasting room sales toward an all wholesale model, and one significant element of that has been a large prospective sale, guess what, to Quebec. Negotiations had been active for months, but after recent Trump trade announcements, Canadians ended them. Other wineries are having comparable experiences. It doesn't matter what the tariffs are or aren't, Canadians don't want to import American alcohol. There are ripple effects through many other industries as well. The U.S. Wine Trade Alliance argued on April 2nd that restaurants will suffer, domestic producers will face new obstacles in bringing their wines to market, and retailers, importers, and distributors across the country will be placed at serious risk. With their biggest profit center decimated, many restaurant investors will decide to take their money elsewhere. Last week, thousands of Oregonians showed up at the hands-off anti-Trump rallies around the state. It was tens of thousands. There were tens of thousands of people just in Portland. And at that protest, plenty of signs criticized the new tariffs. I didn't see any that complained specifically about the administration's impacts on the wine industry, but I would not be surprised if in coming weeks they start to appear. I think this is an important reminder. If you are not in a certain industry, you are probably completely oblivious to the negative ways it's being impacted by Trump's tariffs and all of the other god-awful things that he's doing. I really appreciated this story because even though I have friends in the wine business or friends who come from, families that own vineyards, I didn't really understand. I didn't really think about it. I was thinking about Canadian imports in terms of hard liquor, in terms of beer. Even though we have a thriving winery business in this state, I didn't really consider how negatively impacted our folks in rural Oregon are. The wineries and all of their workers, and the bottlers and the distributors, and all of those other aspects, all of the negative consequences. We are just beginning to understand the devastation to industries in every part of America, from the absolute chaos of Donald Trump wanting to enact his petty revenge for losing in 2020. And because he just enjoys watching everybody squirm. He enjoys watching our suffering. He enjoys destroying the economy. And the suffering he is bringing is not just to the deeply blue population centers of every state. It's hitting all of the rural communities, the agricultural communities. He is indiscriminate in the way he wants Americans to suffer. He doesn't care if you voted for him. He does not care if you are in the reddest of red counties. You will hurt just as much. We're just starting to see what that's going to look like.